The wonderful thing about all the characters, especially Mary Ellen, I think, it was that Mary Ellen, and you were brave enough to go with it, she could be very annoying.
Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. Today, I'm being joined once again for another part of my segment with Michael McGreevey. Michael played Hobie in the episode The Braggart, went on to write 4 different episodes of the Waltons. His father was John McGreevey, who wrote about 22 hours of episodes for the Waltons. Plus, Michael had his own extensive career working for as a writer on other shows. He was also a producer. He was involved in the show Fame, and he was also involved in movies as an actor. Did a lot of work for Disney and did a lot of work with Kurt Russell, who was also his college roommate. So some fascinating stories here. Please welcome back Mike.
The weird thing happened for me was when I was writing and producing the Earl Hamner Storyteller documentary, I looked up all the episodes and all this stuff, and my dad had written the 100th episode, and The Pursuit was the 200th.
Oh, wow. Just keeping it in the family.
Yeah. But just to think about over 200 episodes, it's just mind-boggling. Yeah. Anyhow.
And the whole Earl Hamner Storyteller thing, which you were a producer and writer on and stuff. And that must have been fascinating. I don't know how much of what was in that was new to you, or you knew it and went, I need to get these stories, or.
Yeah, no, a lot of it was new because even though, I knew a lot from just being around the show, I didn't know that much about Earl, amazingly. So that was really rewarding to be able to get closer to him, because obviously I had 3 mentors from a writing standpoint in my career. And one was my dad, obviously, and the other was Mike Landon, and the final one was Earl Hamner Jr. And I have a vivid memory of coming in to get notes on the festival, and being terrified because it was one of the first things I ever professionally wrote, and waiting with sweaty hands in the outer office, and Earl coming out and saying, "Come on in, Mike." And I thought I was going to be in there with the producer, Andy White, with the story editor, and Earl said, "Everybody's busy. You're just going to have to listen to me." And I went, "Oh." And he sat down with me, Judy, and in an Earl Hamner loving, kind way, spent almost 2 hours teaching me how to write a 1-hour episode.
Wow. And
I just look back on that 2 hours as probably the most valuable I ever had. And of course he did it with such, it didn't hurt, anyhow. That's the other thing I want to put across to the fans is I think what people really love about the show is that they're having contact with Earl Hamner, because he totally embodied everything that you saw. It was, and I asked him one time, I said, "Why are you still, 9th season?" He was still dragging himself in, and he had all this other stuff. He had Apple's Way and Falcon Crest was being developed. And he said, "I have to be here. This is about my family and me. And I want to make sure that the truth is always told."
Yeah, well, we were so lucky to have him and for him to be that guiding light throughout it. And, not that we always agreed with every decision. And I know some of, Michael's talked about how there were times, Michael learned, that she felt that they had to push back in different ways because there might be a feeling that he was too close and maybe sentimentalized some things too much. And
absolutely.
And so, that in terms of trying to keep from each of their perspectives, the kids never got to go to table reads, but, the Ralph and Michael and Richard and Ellen and Will, provided they were available and all able to get there for, they really sort of knew their characters and knew the show. And I got the sense that they helped enrich it as well. And that Earl was always smart enough to recognize good input.
He was. Like, you're right. I mean, he was so close to the material and it was so personal to him that sometimes it failed him in terms of good writing and good, storytelling and characterization. But he always listened to everything. It was great that Earl and the producers and all the writers, including myself, were always looking for a way to advance the characters. And we always were very much aware of each actor's strengths. The ultimate moment in the series, I think, when John Boy says, read
Yes.
this German.
Yes, the firestorm. Yes.
Claire Whitaker told me when I interviewed her for the Storyteller documentary, she told me that her and Rod had not written that.
Mm.
And they came in for the final notes meeting, and Earl had suggested something, not that exact thing, but the only note he had was, he said, wouldn't it be effective, the way he always talked, if Mrs. Bremer could translate in German the Bible? And they went, oh, because Earl always looked for, I can remember him saying it to me, he said it to every writer, where's the tear?
Mm.
He not a tear from the character, a tear from the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Where was the moment where the audience was so taken with what was going on in the story or with the characters that they teared up? And that was the only thing he really aimed for. He was always mad at the fans who would say, "Oh, I got your message." He never had a message. He just wanted to tell a good story. And if a message came through, and if it was organic from the characters and the story itself, then fine. Interpret your own, message. But he never set out to say, let's do a show about illiteracy, or let's do a show about alcoholism, or let's do a show about a book burning. That wasn't what was driving it. It was he was saying, how can we reach people so that they understand that maybe their thinking is wrong? Or, the wonderful thing about all the characters, especially Mary Ellen, I think, it was that Mary Ellen, and you were brave enough to go with it, she could be very annoying and very unlikable. Yeah. But, we're all annoying and unlikable at certain points with certain things, as long as it's real and truthful. And what you were able to pull off, and what the writers in writing that character were able to pull off, is she always learned. If she was being a putz or doing something stupid or whatever, just simple things like the baseball mitt versus the fancy dress. You know,
Yeah.
she wasn't being true to herself. You know, and in the end, she's out there with the baseball, with the catcher's mitt. And it carried through all the way to the end for that character. That's the other thing that I think Earl was able to accomplish, was a through line for all of you, for all the characters. You know, Ben, really terrific finish, Ben. Same thing with Jason. Same thing with Mary Ellen. Same thing with everybody. Even with John Boy's departure, it was a complete moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So anyhow.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to also talk about your career, because you've had quite a career as an actor as well. You know, I mean, yes, the fans will remember you as Hobie in the episode The Braggart, but that was far from your very first television appearance, nor your last. And you've touched briefly on, like me, you started as a child.
I mean, I'm maybe like you too. I mean, you're such a lovely singer too. That's what just adore your singing. I was a dancer. I started.
Oh.
I had no intention of being an actor. I was going to be Gene Kelly. Is what I was going to be. But at about age 6, my sister and I came in to my mother and said, we had seen Swing Time, the Astaire and Rogers movie on the TV. And we said, we want to do that. We want to dance. So at 5 years old, I went to dance school. You know, this was in a small town in Connecticut. But within about a year and a half, my dad moved us out to California. And I went to a dance school in Hollywood that was owned by Marge and Gower Champion.
Wow.
Famous dance team. Yeah. And Gower was just starting. He later went on to be the king of Broadway, directing and choreographing shows like Bye Bye Birdie and Hello Dolly and 42nd Street. He was a marvelous talent, a great dancer in his own right, too. And he and Marge were just lovely together. You can go on. They were under contract to MGM for years. And he was doing his first job as a choreographer and director of all the musical segments in an RKO musical starring Jane Powell. Mm. And he said to Marge at one point, I've got this one sequence where I need 9 kids, and they have to be able to sing and dance. And I don't know how to find these kids. And if you knew Marge Shavy, she said, Gower, we own a dance studio. So there was a Saturday, I remember it. And my sister never forgave me because she and I both auditioned. And he picked me, mainly because I had red hair and freckles, I think. Anyhow, it was a movie called The Girl Most Likely with Jane Powell. And that was the beginning. I was 8 years old, I think. And off of that, I got more work as a dancer. I went on a TV show called The Giselle McKenzie Show, which was obviously starring Giselle McKenzie, who was a singer from our hit parade. Wonderful, talented lady with a beautiful voice. You could relate. And she decided that rather than have the 4 dancing, singing guys, you know, in the numbers with her, she wanted 4 little boys. Oh. And so Gower recommended me to that choreographer, Jack Regas, and I became a curfew kid and did 2 years on that.
What is a curfew kid?
It actually, Giselle called us that. It was that we were breaking curfew by being
on shows after your curfew. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
And we played Vegas 4 times. We did the Copacabana with her. We did the Copacabana in Havana. in Cuba, right in the middle of all that mess, too.
Wow.
Revolution. But on that show, which was produced by Giselle's mentor and discoverer, was Jack Benny.
Oh. And
the first time we went to Vegas, we went with Mr. Benny. We were the opening act with her. And Benny tagged me to do a bit with him, a comedy bit. Again, I think because I was just cute. And off of that, an agent signed me as an actor. And I'll be honest, I later went and trained at the Actors Studio in New York when I was 19. But I learned how to act by working with great actors and good directors. And my mom. My mom was a wonderful director. But I just worked constantly. And I discovered I had, for a kid actor, especially a boy kid actor, I had this talent of being able to cry on cue. And that got me a lot of work. And what was funny, I did very serious. I did A Naked City, where guest starred as this kid, troubled kid and all, and Route 66. And then I was on this series called Riverboat, with the first job Burt Reynolds ever had, with Darren McGavin. I was the cabin boy on Riverboat. So I worked constantly up until about 14 or 15. And I started doing work at Disney. I did a couple of the Sunday 2-part Disney shows that people still talk about. I did a thing called Sammy the Way Out Seal, which people that were kids at that time have forced their kids. It's now on Disney Plus, of course. Forced them to, and it holds up. We got to tell you, it was with Bill Mumy, played my brother, and Ann Jillian played my sort of girlfriend. And we just got reunited, went back to the studio together just recently. It was so much fun. But I started doing the Disney work. And then at about 14, I made a decision I wanted to be normal and go to high school and hang out with the guys and girls. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. I look back on it and say, well, I really shouldn't have interrupted my career. But so I was normal for 4 years in high school. And the day I graduated high school, I got on a plane and flew up to Oregon and made a gigantic Western movie with Kirk Douglas, Robert Mitchum, Richard Widmark, Sally Field in her first role, gave Sally her first screen kiss. The Way West. And, I was hooked again. So I had to keep going to college because of the Vietnam War, but I worked and did quite a few Westerns and then started doing these Disney movies with Kurt Russell. They called the Medfield Trilogy, they now call it. Some guy actually wrote a PhD thesis about the Medfield Trilogy. They were very popular. The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, Now You See Him, Now You Don't, and The Strongest Man in the World. And like Richard said to me that, when he dies, they're going to say goodnight, John Boy on the thing. When I die, they're going to say goodnight, Richard Schuyler. They all relate to this. For the first time, I played comedy. And there was a wonderful character actor, Joe Flynn, who had been on McHale's Navy. And Joe taught me so much about comedy, and I had such fun with him. But what happened to me in those days was suddenly I became typed as a Disney actor. And it's sort of like the danger of being on a hit series. Yeah. And I saw it coming. I had gone to UCLA and got a degree in film and television and started writing with Kurt Russell. We were roommates, and
wow.
yeah, I know. I said, I had lunch with him a week ago. You owe me a lot because I was offered tons of money to tell the truth about it. But
I've crossed paths with Kurt a few times.
I was a loyal friend.
Oh, I've always liked him. He always seemed
he's the most likable.
See him, he was just so genuine and so
so real, and a really good actor. And a nice guy, at least to me. But so the Disney thing really, I saw it coming, and I started writing, and I had enough contacts, thank God, through my acting. And through Dad and someone like Earl. Although I mentioned earlier, I must have pitched 7 things before anything clicked at the Waltons. Then I started producing too, television, which was fun. And Fame was the most fun I ever had. It was
now Richard's sister worked on that.
Bronwyn, yeah.
Yeah.
She was our ballerina.
Yeah.
And the kid who wanted to be Gene Kelly, who was a dancer to begin with, was producing and running this show where by the end, we were doing 3 production numbers per episode.
Wow.
And working with great songwriters and great choreographers. And it was a dream come true. It was the best 6 years of my career. I really enjoyed it. I was able to just keep going on series, not as good as that one, unfortunately, or the Waltons. But I had a good run, good career. Did some TV movies like Dad had done, and was able to send 3 kids through college. And
what would you say of the work that you've done that it was maybe the most satisfying, you're proudest of, things like that? That might not be the same thing, but Yeah,
I think as an actor, there was the Route 66 episode. It was about a boy. Ed Asner played my father. I was playing a Jewish boy. Yeah, it was black and white. So, and it's about a kid about to be bar mitzvahed, whose father gets, by Act 1, Ed was dead. And he was it was a wonderful script, and a really good director, David Lowe Rich. And it was me. I was on the screen the whole show. It was terrific. And I can watch that one. It's a lot of. I'm sure you feel the same way. I can watch that show and go, oh, that's pretty good.
You can work there. Yeah.
The best writing that I ever did.
Yeah.
I think it would be a combination of a couple of those Waltons, the Conscious especially, that I was proud of, and then on Fame, I wrote 18 episodes of Fame, but I wrote the closing episode. And, it's very hard to end a series. It's a tough ride. It really is. The Waltons, it turned out you guys didn't know you were going to be canceled.
Yeah.
So that last show that Scott Hamner wrote really wasn't tailored.
Scott said he knew it was the last episode.
He did?
That's what he said. I said, well, he goes, no, we knew. Or maybe but he also said every episode was based on Earl's life, but
it had a little
but
bit
it
of
was.
because John Boy shows up at the party at the end, and it had a little bit of that.
Yeah,
but
so they didn't tell us. If anybody knew, or they had, it may have been that they thought it was likely, because I think they thought season 8 would be our last, because they kind of did a bit of a, with the decade of the Waltons at the end of season 8. So I think it was a nice surprise for all of us to be back for season 9.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure for me to close out the School of the Arts and those characters. And what I did was it was an alumni show. They came back to, and so I had all the cast that had been for 6 years interviewing and doing their little vignette about what the school meant to them and what fame. And the main story was about fame, the other side of fame, where fame can sort of, what I experienced, sort of interrupt your artistic bent, that being well known for something isn't really why you're in love with doing what you're doing. It's because of the artistic satisfaction. And that fame can sort of get in the way of that. And you get stuck in doing something that you don't really want to do. Yeah.
Well, I should let you go because you have been very, very generous with your time, and I have so loved this. And we could go on and on because you have so many amazing stories.
This has been, I adore you.
Oh,
I'm a big fan I am.
Yeah.
And if you ever need me to blather some more about anything, I'm available.
I will take you up on it.
Take care.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for joining me for the conclusion of my conversation with Mike McGreevey. I will be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. If you enjoy these segments, please do hit like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.